apologize for not being at the last meeting, and I guess I logistically got a little bit of a late start, so I apologize on that. But we'll give some updates, and the first one is about that last meeting, which was the Water Alert Reporting Network, WARN. Alyssa, who was the presenter that came, she is interested, if we are interested, in starting a volunteer group on that. It's one that there's about a half-a-day training session that she can go through to teach people how to do this. And really it can be used if you have a waterway in your backyard, or you drive by one, or whatever the case is. It's just a quick way to do a high-level assessment, and it's really just being the eyes and ears of some of the other water protectors out in the state where you can go through that. So if you are interested, there's a sign-up sheet up there. It actually says water monitors or something like that on there. But if you're interested, sign up on that, and Alyssa will contact you and be able to go through. She's thinking probably like late spring, early summer kind of time frame for the training. Okay. Good news, the air quality study. If you remember, the University of Cincinnati and OSU came and they used these stationary monitors, kind of this hip new technology. They have finally gotten published in their technical journal the results of that first study, which is where they did, I think, 6 locations with 4 monitors each, so 24 different monitors, and the results of that have finally gone through the peer review process and have been published in a journal. It's a technical journal that you have to actually have like a subscription to. So we can't yet get at it, but they're going to get us a copy of the results. And Erin Haynes, who is the professor from University of Cincinnati that's been doing this, will be coming, I think, to our May 7th meeting. She said that she was pretty sure that would work. So she'll be able to share those results. If we're able to get those results before then, I'll send them out on email or put them on our website, whatever the case is, so you can see those. The good news is they are going to do a second round at those same locations, so that we'll have 2 sets of data points on that, and they're going to be out in May to do that. The bad news is that's all the funding they have for right now. They are going out for some additional funding, and the reason they're doing that is that they're starting to look at the opportunity for linking what's going on in schools and shale activity, so that maybe there's an ability to understand for those places like schools where people spend a larger amount of time, smaller lungs out there, and what the risks might be, especially when we have school systems like our own that are leasing their land and they have a pad put on the same place that we're going to build the new schools. So they're exploring that. We'll see how that comes up. We're going to start doing some outreach there and talking to some people in the various areas to make sure that we promote something like that again, because this is all about getting data and knowing what's happening and what's not happening. So any questions on that? Oh, the second part is a couple of people participated in, you remember our wristband study? There was a discussion about that where they wore those things like those Livestrong wrist bracelets. That has not yet been accepted by the peer review process. They're still going through that. They're expecting probably like late summer to get that done, and they'll have those results published as well. So kind of exciting that both of those are coming together, and again, this is kind of leading edge stuff. The big news, I think most everybody knows, Rosebud, ODNR approved the application on March 16th, and on the same day, March 16th, Rosebud actually posted their mining bonds and got their permit. There are 2 contingencies. One is on an additional archaeological study, and the second one is to get their EPA water discharge permit. Those are expected to be done, in the next month or 2. So theoretically, any time after that, they could start, punching a hole in the back part there towards the airport and working on other things associated with that. We don't know how quickly they're going to move, if they're going to move at all. Just because they have their permit doesn't mean they necessarily are. However, it's unlikely, given that the fact that they posted the bond, that they're just going to sit on it, because that means they actually have money out of pocket sitting there in an escrow account as part of those bonds. So we expect that they will get started on that as soon as they can. Everybody's asking, in the current environment with, so much shale gas and the pressure on coal, why they would be doing this. I am not part of their organization, so I don't know. But everybody who was at either the January 2010 or the July 2013 meeting should have got a big thick packet. If you didn't, you can call ODNR or let me know, we can get your name on there. The disappointing part is that if you came to any of the other informal meetings we had with ODNR, like here at the church, none of those meetings counted for that official interaction, which I apologize, that was certainly news to me, and I think most of us. They made it, sound like every time we interacted with them and all the questions we submitted would be part of that response. The responses, if you look through it, after literally hundreds of questions and concerns that we submitted, they had about 4 pages of generic answers that were put out there, which I don't know. You can draw your own conclusion. Mike?
Well, I just want to ask everybody a couple questions. So, how many people have received the packet? Okay. How many people received an answer if you submitted in writing directly to them? Because at the first meeting, they had said that, you can also do that. And then they were supposed to respond. So if you sent it in directly to them by mail, the only response I got, and Paul said the same thing, because they had to answer within, I think it was 60 days, they said, we don't have enough information to answer your questions. And then I never heard anything from them again. So I'm just curious, did anyone else experience that?
That they didn't answer our questions?
Yeah, that we submitted
specifically
directly.
submitted, right? Yeah. Yeah, I
So
think
it's like
that's-
just you and me.
Okay, so obviously we're disappointed as an organization. I know I've gotten communications from quite a number of people that they're disappointed. We, as we've stated before, believe that the permit data analysis methods and conclusions are flawed sufficiently such that there is a substantial risk to us as landowners, both to our surface land and probably just as importantly our aquifers. We, as a small board, Carroll Concerned Citizens, not-for-profit, we're exploring what the appeals options are, and there are some of those. The process is at least a 3-step process, and there's kind of method to this approach. One is you actually have to appeal to what's called the Ohio Reclamation Commission, which is a governor-appointed reclamation committee made up of a whole series of folks, mostly from the industry side, and then at least one citizen representative. You only have 30 days, so for us it's 30 days from when the permit was issued, so we have to have that in by April 15th, tax day. This is something that if you miss that, you're done. That's it. You have a 30-day window to try that. We are putting together a response for that appeal, and if it's approved by the board, then we'll go ahead and send that in. Oops, excuse me. That appeal is something that can be retracted should you decide later you don't want to go through the appeal process. But it is something that certainly comes with at least a minimum hurdle that it can't be for harassment of ODNR or the company, and it can't be just to defame the name, we'll say, put it that way. If they think that it's without merit, there can actually be a counter lawsuit on that. We don't believe ours to be without merit. We've, as you all know, spent a lot of time on this with expert testimony, and we are basing, many of our arguments based on that expert testimony. So we will let you know on that. I can't officially say it today, but we will let you know for sure at the next meeting what's going on there. The second part of it can be, and you've heard about this, it's called SMACRA, but Surface Mining Review by the U.S. Department of the Interior. They actually use these federal laws to then, if we are denied as part of the appeal permit process, they can re-review that at the federal level to see whether any of the federal laws have been inappropriately applied or that the analysis is that flawed. They've already been alerted to this, and they will be notified as part of the same appeal process, should we pursue that, so that they can kind of be prepared, and we would send them all the same data that we would send the Reclamation Committee, expert testimony, all of that, because they then review it, purely a paper review, and they either say thumbs up or thumbs down, that's it, there's no like interaction or anything like that. The Reclamation Committee, or excuse me, commission process is kind of like a court hearing. It is something that there are witnesses, there are experts, there is testimony, there is cross-examination. Other parties like Rosebud can get involved in that should they want to, and they can bring their attorneys and do all the same kind of things. The reason that it's so important that any of our arguments be part of that initial appeal is because should those first two reviews fail, there's a third one you can go to, which is actually to file a lawsuit in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. That takes it out of an administrative review, which are the two top ones, and puts it into a court of law. The problem is, or I should say the problem, the basis of that is it takes all of the information submitted from the top one, and that's all the judges get. And this literally goes to a Ohio circuit judge, and they get to have approximately a 15-minute oral argument for each party. So if anybody's familiar with state or federal Supreme Court, it's like that, which is all the information is ahead of time. You get up and do your little song, and then they make a decision on it. So this would be kind of the last stop. And so the challenge is you have to do number one to get to number three. Number two is, I put it as optional, but certainly if we're going to take all the time and effort and cost to go through number one, we would probably do number two as well. Number three is not without cost. There are legal costs with that, but there's minimal filing fees and those kinds of things. So, Mike?
So for those of us who have all received packets, and there's a number of us, is each appeal treated separately? Are they consolidated? Do we
It's a
work
good
with
question. I don't know
CCC?
on that one. I know that others can join an appeal. They can join on either side, so you can enjoin a lawsuit or whatever that's called, but you can say, hey, I'm with Carroll Concerned Citizens, or no, hey, I'm with ODNR/Rosebud, and other parties can enjoin that. But it's a good question, and I don't know if they do separate appeals or whether they put it together more like a class action. I don't really know, Mike. It's a good question.
So the reason I'm asking is, I would like to pursue an appeal, but if we're all essentially appealing very similar or the same things, and there's going to be legal costs, it would seem to me for us to work together to make it happen. Just doesn't make sense to me if there's 10 or 15 of us who are going to file appeals separate, but like the CCC one, not to try and figure out how to do it more efficiently.
I think it's a good point. Other comments?
Would information for the number two be important for three also?
No, the information can't get from 2 to 3 theoretically. Well, I should say, maybe it could as part of the oral argument, but only the written testimony, everything written is up in number one. Once you're done with number one, that's all that gets passed here, but we could include that. Certainly if number two with the feds, that they say, hey, ODNR, go back to square one, we wouldn't have to go to number 3. The feds can say, no, you go back to square one, you start over again on this permit review. Then we could skip number 3.
So apart from the Department of the Interior, and we spoke and I told you about my concerns about the procedural as opposed to substantive issues. Do we have the opportunity to make a federal case out of it? Are we better off doing that?
I don't know. I think it's something we could explore, and certainly, we can talk with our attorney about that and see. But I don't know. It's a good question. So
we only have
well,
2 weeks to file the appeals.
You can once it is likely we will file an appeal because it's a low cost It allows you at any point on the 16th, we can revoke it, or on December 16th, we can revoke it. You know, anytime up to the time of the court hearing. So, but I think your point, I'll write that down with my left hand.
Thank
And then, do you have any sense of the timeframes
On how quickly that appeal would proceed?
for step one, yeah?
It can be as little as a few months and as much as a year to 18 months. It's generally, it's kind of like a court case. They give you reasonable time to prepare, but it also has to do with their docket and everything else that they have. So, yes,
If you appeal, Rosebud cannot proceed, or can?
they can. This does not stop, this is not any kind of a injunction against them in any way. They can proceed ahead, and there's some strategy to proceeding ahead on that. Yeah.
How do we stand with the wetland floodplain deal?
Well, supposedly, we have not seen the final permit. It's one of the things that we've asked for is a copy of the final permit, but supposedly that has been resolved, if you believe what's in the paper, in the documents they sent us. Without having seen what adjustments they made, we don't know. We don't know if they got the floodplain
I've seen
permits
so
and
many
so on.
answers in that thing that said does not apply here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so there are a ton of questions, and that's a really good one. We asked for a final copy of the entire permit. We asked for a final copy of the associated documents that they used to make their determination. We have not received that yet. Supposedly, a new version of that will be put in the county recorder's office. So you'll be able to go in there. There used to be like 4 big binders in there. Supposedly, those will be there. But we've already put in that request. They've acknowledged that they received it. We've asked them to have it before April 15th so that we could review that. But even if they don't, it's not going to have that much impact on our appeal process, should we proceed.
Who should we request a copy of it from?
You request a copy of it from, like in our case, we went directly to the permit manager, which is Brent Havlin, the guy that's been here several times. You can send it directly to them. You can send it electronically. Should follow up with a written version, and you have to give them reasonable notice. And if they ask you, you have to pay for the cost of shipping it to you. But they've never done that so far. So, just jump ahead a little bit. Just some recent news on why we might want to proceed. Over in Indiana, a guy was killed at a Rosebud mine. Similar history in another mine there. And then just reported, again, the Alpha acquisition, they had a net loss of 275 jobs. But it really gets to what else can we do. And to your point, Mike, you can file your own appeal. Your property, you have to be an interested party. The easiest interested party is to own land inside the permit area, which is that 9,500 acres area. You don't have to be inside there, but you should consider it. I don't want to hit everybody out quite yet, but should we proceed on it, it is not a small cost proceedings. It takes, I mean, this is like the Perry Mason thing with the expert witnesses and tons of documentation and all that, and attorney fees. It's nothing that we have taken on from a fundraising challenge to date. I'll just put it that way. It's substantial.
Mutually exclusive, file your own appeal, or be a named party in the CCC?
I don't know. I don't know on that one. We should probably have you talk with Rick Solly, our attorney. I think he probably could answer those unless, Teresa, you know right off the top of your head. Well, how about we'll get the two of you together maybe afterwards. Teresa has a little background in that as well. And definitely, stay tuned. I'm trying not to be cagey here, but I'm also trying to be respectful of the process and respectful of our board, because this is something that we can't take really lightly. But I can say we're likely to at least put in the appeal if we go all the way through process, step 1, step 2, step 3, to be determined, because there's a big price tag with it. I'll just put it that way. We are certainly open to any questions, comments, recommendations along the way. You can see me, you can always email, call me. If anybody needs my cards, they're over there. We're really open to that. If we do proceed, there's a couple of very unique landowners we might be looking for, and we think we know where they are based on the permit. You might think of it as the folks that have water, have already been identified to have water issues coming. So there's about a dozen folks who are going to be dewatered as part of this permit. It's identified in the permit that you will be. We think there might be an angle there, obviously. There's about another dozen folks no, maybe 2 dozen that have a higher likelihood of having some kind of water problems. And so we'll probably, if we proceed, be contacting them directly. If you already know you're one of those folks and are interested, if you can see me, that would be great. If you don't know you're one of those folks, I can let you know. Any other questions or comments? I'm sorry it takes so long on this and make it a longer meeting, but you do have a great topic for tonight. Hopefully not as depressing as this. Okay, yes it is. Just some upcoming meetings. Next Saturday, Water Sentinels. If you're a Water Sentinel or interested in being a Sentinel, we have our spring kickoff meeting at the library 2 to 4. As I mentioned, May 7th, our next meeting, again, a Thursday here. UC, OSU, we think that's probably about 80% likelihood it's that. There's 2 things that could impact that. One is airing schedule. Number 2 is if we really need to all get together for something else on Rosebud, I would flip it around between June and that. We're still planning for no meetings in July or August like we normally do for the summer. However, should we proceed on some of those other things, we may do an impromptu meeting for those that can attend. I realize it's, hay season and vacation season and planting and all that, but we'll go through that. Okay, so back to April 2nd tonight. Chemical right to know. This is something that's pretty important for us at literally the crosshairs of the shale gas boom. But it's also important for us because there's some proposed legal changes out there for the state of Ohio that happen to be in the committee of the representative that we have, Andy Thompson, for Carroll County. So it's a kind of a double fit here. We're very fortunate to have Teresa Mills, Ohio Field Director for the Center for the Health and Environmental Justice and Buckeye Forest Council. I've known Teresa for some time, and she's got over 25 years experience in this industry, protecting the health and safety of us citizens out there. We're also very fortunate to have Silverio, I'm going to screw this up, but Caggiano. Okay, Caggiano, very good. But the battalion chief from City of Youngstown Fire, but almost as important, I don't want to take away from the fire, but he's also deputy chief of the hazardous materials response team for Mahoning County. So he's going to provide a first responder view on why this proposed law change is so important, not just us citizens, but the people that are out there protecting us every day. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa first. She's going to go through some of the geeky law stuff, which is important to understand, and then share some examples right from our own state of Ohio on why we might really care a lot about this. So I'm going to switch over to Teresa's presentation and turn the floor over to her. Here's the clicker. Right here.
Right left.
Right left. Forward, reverse.
Forward is right.
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 Forward is always right.
Forward is right.
Okay.
I get the geeky stuff. Yes, my name is Teresa Mills. I've been doing environmental work in the state of Ohio for 25 years. I started in my own community with a trash incinerator that turned out to be the largest emitter of dioxin in the country. We worked on that for a year, and we were able to close that facility. I've gone on to work, I don't know if any of you remember the schools in Marion, Ohio, where the children had leukemia. I worked on that. We got the 2 schools relocated. I worked on the buyout of the village of Cheshire, next to the AEP Gavin plant because of sulfuric acid raining down on the community. So I have a lot of background. But for 20 years, I have used the community right to know. And if there's any of our industry friends in the audience, if you see that I have made a mistake or I have erred in any way, I would like you to correct me. Because I don't want to be out here spreading lies that some people like to say. So please, feel free to correct me. In 1984, there was an accident in Bhopal, India, where a release of methyl isocyanide killed thousands of people. And that prompted labor unions to start asking questions in the United States about what was in our own communities. Our wonderful friends in Washington didn't take it too seriously until there was a similar accident in Institute, West Virginia. And that prompted the community right to know under SARA Title III. And there's a lot of stuff out there that you do have the right to know. But what I found when I first started working on fracking was I tried to get some of that information from first the Ohio EPA on one of the well pads, and then second, after Ohio EPA told me that they didn't have any of the information, I tried to get it from ODNR. And ODNR sent me back to Ohio EPA. So I knew, and I talked to several lawyers. In fact, I sat in a room with 15 lawyers one day and told them my suspicion that Ohio was in violation of federal law. So it turned out that the lawyers that I was sitting in the room with knew very little about the community right to know laws. So I told them that I would give them 6 weeks, and if they didn't file a lawsuit, then I would do it myself. I did not file a lawsuit, but I filed a petition with the federal EPA claiming that Ohio was in violation. Within a month, believe it or not, the US EPA came back and said, well, you're right. They said that Ohio could create all the laws they wanted to, but they couldn't allow the oil and gas industry to just report to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. They also had to report to the State Emergency Response Commission, your local Emergency Planning Committee, and your local fire department. That caused quite a stir. I was called several names, but that's okay, you know. I'm a big girl in more ways than one. Okay. Emergency planning, community right to know. Sometimes you will hear me refer to that as EPCRA. That's the initials, Emergency Planning, Community Right to Know. It was passed, Congress passed it as an emergency as part of the Title III of Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act. So if you ever want the chemical information, a lot of times all you have to say is SARA Title III, and they will know what you're talking about. This was enacted on October the 17th, 1986. EPCRA is a separate and freestanding law designed to address concerns about the effects of chemical releases on communities. I mean, everybody talks about first responders, and that's very important, but the law is called the community, okay? Community. EPCRA expands the role of the citizens and the state and local governments in emergency planning. Do all of you know that there's emergency plans for your county? Yeah. Emphasize the importance of emergency response. Contains provisions for emergency preparations and chemical risks. Ensures the general public has access to information about chemicals. Chemical risk. When I was working on the village of Cheshire in Galpless, AEP wanted to bring in anhydrous ammonia to use to reduce the sulfur dioxide coming out of the stacks. And they determined, AEP was kind of silly, but they told the mayor and the president of council that they had done a risk management plan. And that if one of the tanks of anhydrous ammonia would lose its contents, that the village would have 360 seconds to evacuate to 8.9 miles. I can't even find my keys in 360 seconds. So somewhere out there, there's probably plans. EPCRA mandates the establishment of the State Emergency Response Commission by the governor of each state. We have that in Ohio. Are they effective? No. Each CERC must designate emergency planning districts and your local emergency planning committees. Do any of you know who's on your local emergency planning committee? Each LEPAC must write an emergency plan for its district, and the CERC makes recommendations and reviews each plan under its jurisdiction. Each LEPAC, again, local emergency planning commission or committee, plan must include facilities covered in transportation routes, responsible personnel, and notification procedures. This is all public information. Okay? It must give you the methods for assessing the release, emergency equipment and facilities, evacuation plans, trainings, and exercises. Reporting requirements. All companies are required to report to CERC the identity of each facility containing any substance on the EPA's list of extremely hazardous substances in any amount that meets or exceeds the established threshold. Okay, one of the things that we are going to be attempting to do is that there is a caveat to this first part where it says threshold planning. Okay, that's usually about 10,000 pounds of a chemical. However, the law also states that if the local emergency planning commission or the local fire department requests the chemical inventory, the threshold becomes 0. So a fire department or your local emergency planning commission is not bound by that threshold. So if there's 10 pounds of a chemical, they have to give you that information. Okay? Your local fire departments are authorized to inspect well pads. They are allowed to inspect well pads. It's going to be hard, but by law, they can do it.
So, why do you say it'll be hard?
Toward the end of the presentation, I will show you why I say it's hard.
Okay.
Okay? Establishes reporting requirements to provide information on hazardous chemicals, contains requirements to inform the general public about toxic releases. Facilities are responsible for notifying CERC that the facility is subject to the emergency planning. Paul, can you take? Could you read something?
Sure. Facilities are subject to EPCRA emergency release notification requirements, must notify the local emergency and the state emergency committees in the event of a release of a reportable quantity of an extremely hazardous substance or any comprehensive environmental response, compensation, and liability act hazardous substance. Wow, that's a lot. No wonder your voice is going.
Well, one of the important things here is they have to report, and they're supposed to report within a half an hour. And you'll see later on why I bring that to your attention. Okay.
Do you
This
want a
is-
cough drop?
I've got one in my mouth.
Okay.
It's not.
Oh, okay, let me try that. Does anyone have an idea of what this picture is?
Looks like a tire fire in the back.
I'm sure you've all heard of it. The Wellcat fire in Monroe County.
Oh, yeah.
This is what this is. Okay. Okay. Now, like I say, it would be hard to inspect. The company, Stat Oil and Halliburton, prevented the firemen from going on the well path.
Uh-oh.
And that's why their EMA director was so mad. How can they do this?
If I was a fireman, I don't know
Say
if I
no.
want to be there anyway.
They didn't, well, they didn't stay long. The fire department, they were there, they had like 11 fire, or 7 or 11 fire departments there to begin with. And because stuff kept exploding and it was like shrapnel, they would pull the fire departments off site. So finally, the fire departments just gave up. Because there's really nothing that the fire departments can do. So why put their lives at risk?
Did it just burn out? How
Well,
did
they
it
did
stop?
find, well, they had to bring in a firefighting team from Carroll, Texas.
Like Red O'Dare.
Yeah,
Just like-
called Wildcatter.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see this is the, you can see that the looking west of the site, the whole site's destroyed. This is looking straight on. These are all of the 20 trucks, 20 semis.
Yeah, this was during the fracking process,
Right,
so
this
not
was-
during drilling, not in production.
This is looking east. What was never brought up was that there was two 30,000 gallon propane tanks. And when I got the chemical inventory for this, those tanks never showed up.
Was
So
there,
would, oh, go ahead.
was there a fine or anything associated with this? I mean, if you have a picture of it, I just thought I'd throw that out.
Well, the last time we were at the state emergency response commission meetings, Ohio said they were still investigating. That's been since last June. Okay. You can see some of the trucks. Hundreds of tires that are, this is the semi. This back here is the frac stack. You'll see it much better. In the next picture, see the Christmas tree? See the very top of it? It's a well blowout. That's the fluid coming out at the very top. And there's a better picture of it. This, the trailer, excuse me, the trailer right here was their main trailer. This is where the material safety data sheets were. Okay, so if a fire department needed to know what was there, it was already on fire. This is called a fire curtain or a water curtain, and they had to spray these trucks because there was explosives in those trucks. It just shows the well pipe still burning. Okay. Total destruction, total destruction. Now, the reason I bring this up is the white truck you see there is a hydrochloric acid tanker. Then you have two tractor trucks, red. And so pay attention to those. Here they are now after the fire. Up there's the two red trucks. Here's the hydrochloric acid tanker, aluminum tank, and the chemical totes.
house is buried in a fire. And there's what the timber looks like after it's totally destroyed.
What's its context?
Hydrocarbons,
So did the
not
acid
this.
burn off, did it spill, I mean,
And there's the 2 red trucks.
What caused the fire, do you know?
They say it was
Hydraulic
hydraulic.
hose
Hose.
leaks that then started the fire.
And if they had the proper emergency equipment on site, they could have caught it before it got down here.
Did the chemicals get released to people's properties? A good
In the
distance?
fire. Well, most of it went up.
Also didn't set anywhere or anything like that?
Mm. But the problem that I saw with it is, if you look on like Google Map, you'll see that downwind of the site, and over there goes a dairy farm. Oh, that's
So
kind
the
of
cows
concerning.
breathed the fumes?
Mhm. And that's what chemical toast look like after they've been on fire. It's just the cage. I'll give you a couple of seconds, you can.
Where did this happen? Where is this?
Monroe County.
Oh, Monroe County.
This just gives you a picture and tells you what all these different black globs are. Because you really can't tell what they are. And here's what it looks like from the air. This site was cited by the Army Corps of Engineers a couple of years ago. Because you can see where they have terraces there. That's a man-made hill. And it started to slide down. And it filled it in a creek. And so they got cited by the Army Corps of Engineers for that. And gee, what's on top, what's right above it? Here's where the well pad was, is. This is a compressor station they're still putting in. And Morgan County, did everybody hear about the Morgan County spill? Lasted for days and days, and then thousands of pounds and gallons of oil that spilled into a creek. This shows you what their wonderful well pads look like. It's just a little piece of plastic. And actually, if you look at more of this well pad, their rig is actually set on wooden pallets. Thank God. Thank God. There wasn't a fire on this site. And then there was another well blowout just about a week before the one that caught on fire. There's a story about it, and I'm going to bore you with that. But here's what the well blowout looked like. This is gas coming out of that well. Said it sounded like a jet plane, and it lasted for over a week. Okay. Now, when I first got these pictures, got them from an inside source within one of the state and/or federal agencies, I was quite upset because of the way things was being handled. So I knew that the local communities are working so hard to try to protect their own communities that I went to these state groups that didn't seem to be doing a lot on fracking and asked them what they were going to do. After I showed them these pictures, what are you going to do about this? Your citizens need you. You need to stand up. So we did form a right to know team. We have the Ohio Environmental Council, Ohio Citizen Action, the OFA, which is the Ohio Ecological Farm and Food, the League of Women Voters, the League of Conservation Voters. And we're trying right now to prevent the law from being changed. ODNR wants the reporting to go back to them instead of the way it's supposed to be. Still don't think it's legal, but they're still trying to do it. And there's a bunch of other things that they're trying to do. So we're trying to prevent that. I'm not going to cover that all up because Excel's going to cover it. And my voice is just like... if there's anything I can do, if you have any questions.
Yeah, why don't we hold the questions till the end after Sil, we'll get through that, and maybe Teresa's voice can recover a little bit, but we'll do some Q&A, so.
Well, but I am going to, citizens need to have a better understanding, a more thorough understanding of what the right to know means. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be going across to Ohio into mostly the communities where there's a lot of fracking going on. And I'm going to start training the community first responders, which is actually the community, because you are the ones that see it first, and to train you to get out of the way, not to get in the responders' way, and hopefully to take the next step, which would put one of you on the local emergency commission. Okay.
Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate that, especially with your voice. I wanted to, as I mentioned, to bring Sil up now, and again, this is kind of the background on how all these committees work together and commissions, and Sil's going to talk a little bit more about the first responder view, and just as importantly, kind of the concerns associated with this potential House bill change and flipping the responsibility back to ODNR. So, Sil, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, people, for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. I've got some friends back there. My name is Sil Caggiano. I am a battalion chief in the Youngstown Fire Department. Been working there for approximately 33 years, doing ambulance, ran through the fire department, all the way up to the ranks battalion chief. That's my paying job. My non-paying job is deputy chief of the Mahoney County Hazardous Materials Response Team. I also sit on the state of Ohio's Technical Advisory Committee for hazmat, decon, and weapons of mass destruction, and I'm also the Region 5 coordinator, which gives me direct ties to Carroll County because Region 5 includes Carroll County. I worked with Dennis Fenton, the hazmat chief for Carrollton County. We brought a considerable amount of money in to help their team out. My sister-in-law also lives in Carrollton, so I've got some ties. What Teresa was talking about is absolutely true. The hazmat teams embraced Sarah Title III because the hazmat teams, that was their genesis. Sarah Title III enacted the ability for these communities to know what was in their communities and be able to plan for it. And therein lies the problem. The problem is almost three-pronged. Back when they flew planes into the World Trade Center, we had a lot of money being thrown out there to start, preparing, emergency preparedness, the national response plan, this, that, and the other. Well, as time went on and the sequester kicked in, most of those grants were pulled back. So it cut back on what we could do as far as equipping our hazmat teams. We're going to buying non-essential stuff. Now with what's going on with this current administration in the state, they're taking the state sales tax and they're eating that away. So what do your townships and your cities and your communities do first? They cut your police and fire because that's the biggest drain. So now my ability to get money has just narrowed down. So what I've got to do is I've got to look within my community, just like Dennis asked it. So what have I got in here? What do I got to prepare for? I can't buy this widget and that gadget because, Osama bin Laden's boys are going to come here and blow this place up with anthrax. What's in my community that I need to get equipment for? Because I've got so much money that I've got to spend. That's where we go to our Tier 2 reporting forms, and they're supposed to be submitted to your LAPCs, and the repository is supposed to be your EMA director. They're supposed to keep them. Hazmat teams like myself, we keep them in a computer database called Cameo. Basically what our county does is we have them professionally scanned into a Cameo database. The EMA keeps them in a Cameo database. We have a copy in the hazmat team, and anybody else within the county runs on Cameo, which is Computer-Aided Management of Emergency Operations, has that data available to them. So every year, I take 1/3 of my emergency response facilities, and I look at my facilities that have what they call EHFs, which is immediately dangerous to life and hazards, and I run scenarios. So I know what's in my county, I know what I need, I'm not looking with blinders anymore. Now comes the frackers. They don't want to report what they've got. They don't want to tell you what they've got. It's a trade secret. Tired of hearing that. I've dealt with trade secrets for 23 years on hazmat. I don't care what you juice, what's in your juice. All I care is what's its chemical composition, does it float on water, does it sink, is it going to rise in an air column, is it going to sink in an air column, so I can mitigate the problem. That's all I care about. I don't care what, I'm not going to go home and make this stuff and sell it to Joe Schmo, who's going to try to do it faster, cheaper. I don't care. The only thing I care about is the public that I serve and the first responders that called me there because I'm supposedly the specialist in hazmat. Now, if I don't have that information, I'm no better than they are. I'm looking at things too. And in rural communities, it's even more important because, in Youngstown, I'm just some schmuck that works on the fire department. But in rural communities, your volunteer firemen are your next door neighbors. They're your next door neighbor's kids. They're your next door neighbor's family, okay? So I'm just not, in Youngstown you can get lost in the population. I'm just some schmuck. A lot of times, those are the guys that just sit at the fire stations and don't do anything all day. But here in the rural communities, Dennis gets off his job and runs his butt over to run a hazmat spill. It's part of his community service. They're your neighbors. So I got to protect those people. I got to protect you people, and I've got to protect the industry because I kind of like the fact that in February I opened up my gas bill and it wasn't like $900. So I don't want to get rid of them. I just want them to play nice. And the problem has been notoriously the industry has not played nice with the fire service. They try to keep us at arm's length, and I don't understand why. Maybe it's because they're ignorant. We've attempted to reach out. There was a meeting, I don't know if you were available for that meeting, Dennis, about 2 years ago with Chesapeake. It was in, I think it was in Columbiana County. All the chiefs got together with a meeting and Chesapeake talked to us, and it got to the point where Chesapeake was telling us, when we have a problem at our wellhead, we'll let you know. You stay off, we'll take care of it. You don't do anything. And one of the chiefs stuck his hand up and said, excuse me. So he says, according to the Ohio Revised Code, if you have an emergency on your well pad, that now becomes my well pad. The guy closed his briefcase, picked up, says, thank you for coming, have a nice day, and walked out the door on us. That is what we've been getting from the industry. As I sit on the Technical Advisory Committee, we've reached out. Now the Technical Advisory Committee, because it represents 66 counties and 66 different hazmat teams, we can't get involved in stuff that only affects a certain number of counties. But here in Carroll County, this is kind of like the epicenter. Carroll County, Mahoning, Columbiana, Guernsey, and that's kind of your epicenter. They don't want to get involved in it too much, but we're keeping our finger on it because we know it affects brothers. It's like a brotherhood. It affects the brotherhood of the hazmat teams. So we kind of watch what's going on, and we get we get involved in it only where we need to. And I found myself approximately a year ago involved in an argument in my own community that connected me with some of the guys from Sarah and connected me with Dr. Cowan, who connected me with Melissa through the Ohio Citizens Action, and connected me with you good people here, people who are concerned what's going on in the industry as opposed to Sarah Title III reporting. And I gave testimony to the State Agricultural Committee. And the curious thing in that testimony, I detailed my objections, just like I did here, as to why we should be reporting. And at the bottom I said, if you're inserting ODNR in between the first responders and the industry, you're going to create a problem that's going to cost people lives, and it's going to cause problems in the end. And it wasn't 3 months later that Monroe County came up, and it was a living example of what I said. So the big thing is, we want to protect you. We want to protect the industry. The industry doesn't seem to want to talk to us. And as they did in Monroe County, and I thought this was rather arrogant, when the EPA finally stepped in and said, hey, look, this is BS. There's been no aerial monitoring. Nobody knows where this stuff's been going. You haven't called, any hazmat teams out to take care of the problem. They're chastising industry magazines for, behaving like children. Well, that's what the EPA's job is. We work closely with the EPA as much as we can. There's been a lot of turmoil in the state with the EPA and the EMA. But that's their job. And for an industry magazine who supposedly represents the industry to make a statement that it was childish of the EPA to make such a stink about not getting the information either shows arrogance, which is dangerous, or disconcern, which is dangerous also. It really concerns me because that arrogance now applies to me and my guys, because when I have a problem, like Dennis will tell you, if you got a spill in the community, who's your first phone call? EPA. We want their experts in with us. I hate to call them experts, we want their specialists in with us.
It's also the law.
Yeah.
It's also the law that have to do that.
So, with wanting to insert ODNR, they're doing something that again kind of makes me look back. It's like, okay, most of these people got in office by saying we want to shrink government. But now we're going to insert ODNR needlessly in between first responders and what's already established. So we're kind of growing government again. And I really wouldn't mind if it was people that said, okay, I could talk to you, you could talk to me, we understand each other, we've done hazmat, we've done this. No, you're talking about people that really don't understand what's going on other than what the industry is, about anything other than the industry. Now, when I sit down with other hazmat people, we can talk chemistry, we can talk physics, we can talk about our job. We understand that. I can look at a Tier 2 reporting form from any other industry. And mind you, every other industry except the well drillers are reporting this. And I made that comment to one of the state representatives. I can walk into the State House, walk to your janitor, and ask him for an MSDS sheet on what he's cleaning this floor with, and he'll give it to me. But yet I cannot go on site and ask for what's in your frac sauce and get a good answer. It's kind of duplicitous. I don't think it's very fair to other industry people either. Now, once again, I understand trademarks. We deal with them all the time. But again, I got a job to do. My job is protecting people. My job is to protect the environment. Because when this stuff dumps into the water, and trust me, we've had Ben Lupo, who decided it would be a great idea when his injection wells weren't in service. His great idea was to start dumping stuff into sewers and into waterways that eventually got into the Mahoning River, that eventually got into the Beaver River, and Lord knows that the people in Beaver, Pennsylvania were sucking that stuff up to drink because he had been dumping it for such a long time. Now, he got smacked, and he got smacked pretty hard. The cleanup costs were $3 million. He's spending 2.5 years in jail, which is a lot of time for an elderly individual who's had a liver transplant or kidney transplant. And he was fined. The fine was kind of minuscule, $20,000. But on the other end, he had to come up and he's selling off his corporations and had to pay the $3 million for the cost of cleanup. So, I don't know. It's kind of a wash there. But there are people out there, and I don't care if it's the best, I don't care if XYZ oil company is the industry standard and model people. There's accidents out there. That's why they call them accidents. Anything can happen at any time. And what I really am opposed to, in support of my firefighter friends and my hazmat friends and the population, is anybody inserting themselves in between the information that I need to mitigate a problem in some boilerplate language that came from ALEC on why they don't want you to find out. And it went even further with the gag orders and stuff. They didn't want to tell doctors what these people were being hit with. Then it turned into they wouldn't allow the doctors to tell anybody else. So now if, God forbid, Dennis gets something and it ends up being debilitating, if he goes for a disability claim, the doctor that treated him for his chemical exposure at the well fire can't tell his disability claim people what he got exposed to. So now Dennis is denied his disability, all because he decided one day to say, yeah, I'll help. And he went and he did it. That's wrong. Absolutely, positively wrong. And I'm a professional firefighter. I get paid for, take risks. So some of it goes with the territory, but still, it's still wrong there too. You know, these guys have wives and families that they gotta, provide for too. So, in summary of everything, what's going on currently with the law, I'm 110% behind them, making sure that they stay with Sarah Title III, do their Tier 2 reporting for us. And we have those on hand. So at least when we respond, I can say, yeah, I know what it is. I mean, let's be serious. Over the years, we kind of have a list of chemicals that they use. The only thing is, we don't know, it's sort of like, your Aunt Tilly's recipe. You kind of know what was in there, but unless you know how many of the pinch of this and how much is that, you're never gonna get the recipe right. And every once in a while, I don't know how it is, some of your relatives, but they kind of leave something out every once in a while. They forget to put something in, and you go taste the apple pie, it's like, it doesn't taste like Aunt Tilly's at all, because they kind of left something out. We have an idea what's in these chemical compositions, but we don't, a lot of times you don't exactly know what's in them. And once again, it just hampers us from being able to protect you. It's a problem. And again, I can't reiterate, I am not anti-fracking. I say frack away as long as you're taking care of the environment, as long as you're taking care of the first responders, and when you have a problem, the right people are called, and the right people have the information they need to do the right job. Now, if you give them all the right information and they screw up, that's on them. But to wait 5 days like they did in Monroe County for information from the ODNR, that's telling me that your process ain't working. And the conversations subsequently I've had with people from the ODNR, they want to set up a whole nother way of getting the information out. And fortunately for them, the wheel's already been created. I mean, I'm not wanting to recreate the wheel. Like, oh, we'll put $3 million and we'll create this website. We'll go ahead and create the website. Use Cameo. The government made it for you. Cameo was designed as a repository for Tier 2 reporting firms. It's free. Don't have to pay a dime for it. Just go to Cameo, download the darn thing, and then put it on your website. So that when I need, and if you really want to protect it, give the hazmat teams passwords. Give your EMA a password. Put the password in, I can look, okay, this is what they got at this site, no big deal. No, we're going to create this big fur ball. We're going to insert another layer of government that's just hampering me doing my job. Everything Teresa said about Tier 2 is correct, but if you listen to it, and if you really read into it, Bhopal and the stuff that happened in West Virginia, it's all familiar. If you read into the backgrounds of what went on there, it sounds a lot like what you had here. Industry had arrogance. And we've had it for a number of years. After World War II, we started inventing chemicals left and right. Texas is still blowing up their first responders with ammonium nitrate. Unfortunately, they haven't got the lesson yet to teach their people how to handle this chemical. But here in Ohio, we don't kind of want to be like Texas. I don't want to blow Dennis up. I don't want to blow myself up. It's bad. I have a dangerous enough job. So that's where we're coming from, and I hope you guys understand just how important your CERT and your LAPCs are, because those are the repositories. And you should have on your LAPC. We try to get industry involved. We have some people in Mahoney County that are from industry that are there. We have a citizens representative. We have a government representative. We have media representative in them. So your LAPC should be a cross-section of your communities. You should have about 10 people on there. And the meeting should be held in I don't know if the EMA does it here, but it should be almost a quarterly meeting. Every 3 months they should have a meeting and the people should be involved in that process. Because that's the only way you're going to know what's going on. And that is the avenue with which you travel to get your information. You want information, you go back to your LAPCs and say, hey, I want information on this, and they will provide it for you.
So, thank you for educating us, but given what's going on, what can we do either as a group or as individuals?
You got to go back to your LAPCs. The state of Ohio is not exempt from Sarah Title III reporting. The whole thing in a nutshell is putting the wrench on the nut and making sure that it's done. Okay, and that onus is on you guys. You've got to go back and you've got to be adamant about this information. In Mahoney County, we've got maybe 4 or 5 wells. not that much. Trumbull County's starting to see a few more. But here you guys are in the epicenter.
Hundreds,
You guys are the epicenter. Everybody is talking about Carroll County. I think the comment is they're drilling down here like crazed woodpeckers. So you guys are, you guys are the ones that have to put the wrench on it and say, hey, look, we need this information, if not for us, for our first responders. Because those are the guys that are gonna show up and protect your properties.
If I could ask, Andrew LeBeau is here from Ohio Organizing Collaborative. If you don't mind, Andrew, they put together kind of a little, a brief statement that would go to our representative, Andy Thompson, who was in charge of House Bill 490. If you don't mind, maybe just read that, it's only a few paragraphs.
Yeah, for sure.
And then if, again, do not feel obligated, but should you want to join on that, he'll have some copies, you can just sign that, or maybe we can pass one around, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's pretty short, so just, why don't you go ahead and read that.
For sure. So essentially all it says is, to the Honorable Representative Andy Thompson, I am writing you today to show my support for our state's first responders, from our paid firemen and emergency response professionals to our small town volunteer fire and EMT. It is important and necessary that you use your power as chairman of the House Finance Subcommittee on Agriculture Development and Natural Resources to amend the language of the 2015 Ohio budget. Oil and gas must give their chemical information to first responders instead of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources to alleviate any bureaucratic slowdown, still touched on, of information in the event of an accident or emergency situation where lives are at stake. Without prior knowledge, accepting oil and gas companies from chemical reporting standards shared by other industry will do nothing but put first responders at a higher risk of danger if they are called to an oil and gas related accident. And then touched on the Monroe County fire. It says, in 2013, Monroe County experienced a oil pad explosion, a fire that burned for 5 days, and a fire that killed off 50,000 fish that lived downstream. The first responders were never originally aware of the chemicals they were exposed to. We cannot allow these events to continue in Ohio and stand with Ohio's first responders and change the language. Now, if you guys wouldn't mind, pass this around, and then just hold on to your copy and I can pick it up whenever you're all done. But it would have to be filled out completely, we're not gonna bug you or anything, but that's legally, so it can actually count for like one letter. So that way Andy Thompson can't say, oh, it doesn't count. So if you don't mind, that would be
Just
wonderful.
grab one and send it around.
Yeah, just send it around.
While we're doing that, open the floor for questions and comments, and depending on how Teresa's voice is doing.
I'll be fine, but I do want to say one thing, and this isn't to try to twist your arm, but your representative is the one person that the oil and gas industry, or the ODNR got to go to the federal EPA. It was his doing that got ODNR to try to go, it got ODNR, Andy Thompson and ODNR went to the US EPA and said, we want to change this back.
So our representative was the
Yes.
initiation
Yes,
of that
absolutely.
change
Absolutely.
for one industry.
Do we know how much money he's accepting from lobbyists?
We're not getting into that.
I was just curious.
But questions or comments?
I just have a comment. Did anyone see anything unusual Tuesday evening before sunset?
Did not.
Well, you know where we live.
Yeah,
on Mountain
Yeah.
We're looking toward Carroll, and it hasn't been that far, and I just went to the sewing room, and I thought, Ben, you gotta come and look at this. I've never seen anything like it before. And it's like my hands, like here's one, and it's not a ball of fire, but it was all red, and at the top, it looked like smoke. Two columns.
Interesting.
And the wind diminished that evening. They just stayed there for a long time.
I've never seen it, and I told Ben, come look at this, come look at this.
Maybe
It would have been
maybe
something,
flaring. Did it go on
because
very
the
long?
pads are
or-
out by our place, we
Right.
have two of them.
Right.
They're fracking a big pad by us now, but it was still north of the pads. It wasn't coming from the fracking pad.
I don't know. Anybody else hear anything or see anything?
And yet it didn't look like fire that big of a length, and then the dark up in the top, there was two of them.
It gave the appearance of two big fires side by side.
Right.
It's dark.
Interesting. Okay.
And no one was seeing anything.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
In
in our community, assuming that there are plans for emergencies, are those open, are those plans available to the public or are those secretive?
I don't know, that's a good question.
They're public view, and they too should be in the repository of the EMA directives. Basically what happens is your individual emergency support functions, your police, your fire, your hazmat, all of those get together and they write these emergency plans. And then these things are put together in a binder and put into a file cabinet or stored somewhere so that they can pull them out and run that. What I would specifically in this county look for is, has the EMA done any kind of emergency planning for a catastrophic well release? And by saying catastrophic, when you start running scenarios, okay, I run worst case scenarios. If I got a company that's got some immediately dangerous to life and health chemicals, I've based that on a 100% release in a 1 minute span. How many people are gonna die right away if this was just a total containment fit? And that's what you're gonna have to look at. If they have that, and there should be a worst case scenario that you can run through.
It's like, you know, if a cloud of smoke goes over my house, do I go to the basement or do I head out? I have no idea.
There's a lot of times where if it's high enough, you do what they call shelter in place. That's always an option. It all depends on the winds. It all depends, like today with the rain, you don't know if the stuff's gonna precipitate out through the rain. There's a lot of variables, but there should be plans available, and if they don't, it's on you to get to your EMA director and make sure that those are done. That's his job.
And that's one of the things that we'll be covering in training.
What's the status of the bill?
What's the status of the House bill?
That's in the budget, so they're still working on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be passed until June.
Yeah,
June, that's gonna be up,
yeah.
it would be passed.
I mean, and independently calling his office too, or, emailing yourselves will go a long way, very long, especially being in this district. I think-
Representative Thompson's family publishes a birding magazine.
Right?
And it's
Yeah.
important that you vote with your pocketbook.
Ah,
I'm an avid birder, and I canceled my subscription when the Marietta Maniac became There's the rest of you.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Tim?
What comes to my mind is putting their feet to the fire. People that make this decision ought to suffer the same type of loss that we would suffer. If I make a decision, and I'm in that position to make a decision for our water, for example, here, when they know it's going to destroy our aquifer, well then, they should be liable. As an individual, the governor, everybody who's ever appointed people in ODNR, all these people ought to be liable. And before this all starts, we need to let them know that we will hold them accountable to the loss of their financial status if we lose what we have here. And we will spend everything we have for as long as it takes to put these people out of business. And I listen, the politicians, every single one, regardless of who they are or what they are, and hold them to it. I can't see talking about this stuff. To me, it's a bunch of junk. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to sit around in here and listen to this stuff without knowing that either you do your job or you get off of that job. And if it comes down to we the people, then by God, we better start to stand up and stand for something, either that or get rolled over by everybody that walks into this county. Now, I love coming to these meetings, but within 2 months, we're gonna know whether we're gonna do anything or whether we're gonna let them take us alive.
Yep.
And I just wonder what we're going to do. I wrote that in an email to you. Somebody is liable for this type of stuff. We need to find out who they are, and we need to go after them. That's the only way they're gonna know we mean business.
Well, it's a good point, Tim, we appreciate that. Certainly, on the election side, you can vote with your votes.
Oh, yeah.
You can vote with your pocketbook, you can vote with your letters, all of those things. I don't know all the laws and what protects elected officials, but I know there are some that protects them against certain kinds of lawsuits. But it's a passionate area that we all care about, and so
Right.
I appreciate your sentiments. Mike?
Slightly different paths. Have you heard anything about this legislation about if the state of Ohio changing the law that if you have a maximum unit size in your lease, they can force pull you, and do you know what's going on with that?
I don't know the details, but I've heard about that, essentially making part of the legal contract invalid.
Well, actually, what I heard was they make the whole thing invalid, and they treat you just as if you had been forced pulled, even if you have a lease with them.
Correct. Yeah, I don't know a lot about that, but it is something that would be disconcerting in any contractual law at minimum, let alone as this. But again, this is another one to go back to your representatives on and make your voices known, that's for sure. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
I'd just like a comment from someone about Leesville, Scioto, and Hanoverton, because it seems to me like that's like a gazillion wells all together in one spot.
They're talking about, and maybe, I don't know, still, it's the processing plants, because there's, you know, a cryogenic separation plant north, a cracker plant south, and now a cracker plant west. I know you have some kinds of plants in Youngstown, but obviously, that's like a whole bunch of wells or something. I mean, is that 100 times the concern of a well, or, you know?
Well, what you've gotta look at is when they start condensing this stuff into LP or whatever, you know, they're gonna do with it. Now you're looking at something that, you know, when gas comes out, it has no expansion ratio. Gas is gonna come out and it's gonna burn. When these cracker plants start crunching it and turning it into liquefied petroleum, you have an expansion rate of somewhere around 20,000 to 1. So now 1 gallon of, you know, liquefied petroleum is gonna multiply out to mushrooms, out to much, much more. And there's always a problem with that. We don't have any up in here in Mahoney County, but you've got some going on over in Columbiana County.
Is there generally better preparedness at that facility because they're in a day-in, day-out industrial facility versus
Those
a migrant
companies are,
one?
we have one sitting on the edge of Columbiana and Mahoney County, and those people have been very open to having first responders come through and talk to us about it.
So that would be another one to reach out in the same way. And I don't know whether they would be exempted as part of HB 490 or not,
I don't think they're exempted. Most of your exemptions come at the well.
at the site. Okay.
But at that particular point, you're dealing with a no.
Yeah, right,
You're
right,
dealing with a-
true.
And to kind of expand upon this, I did a rail car class on DOT 111s, which are becoming another huge problem. But the rail industry is projecting multiplying the liquid gas shipments and multiplying the crude oil shipments. I mean, they're projecting huge increases. And they're building these stations now where they can fuel, or they can load up approximately 150 to 200 rail cars at one time of either LP or of crude oil. And I'm seeing a lot more LP cars on rails now. I'm seeing a lot of long DOT 111 crude oils. And you know, it's going to be a problem in the future. In fact, crude oil and LP shipments looking to eclipse ethanol. You know, crude oil's already eclipsed ethanol, but they're looking to eclipse both of them. Rail companies are selling stocks like crazy on it, and they're buying. You're seeing a lot of these oil-based companies buying up these smaller rails, like Ohio Rail. The Ohio Rail Company, you ever see those cars? Those are all owned by one company, and it's a oil and gas shipper. So they're starting to eat these things up, and you're seeing the market start to play a little bit there. That's another thing you can look at. A lot of these industries, related industries, watch what they're doing, and it's kind of an early indicator of what's going to be happening further down the pike. And the DOT 111 problem, DOT 111 rail car problem is just another fight for another day.
But it is a fight for another day, but it's an important fight because
I don't know if you saw the dispatch story, but the dispatch ran an art map on communities within a half-mile radius of, not really, a half-mile of the rail lines carrying the Balkan crude, and it was 1.4 million people.
In Ohio.
And basically, on those types of accidents, there's nothing that first responders can do. They just have to let it burn.
Those are sitting burns.
Yeah, so
Because if I put it out, instead of having
you're distressed.
30 or 40,000, gallons of crude being burned off in the environment, I now have 30,000 gallons of crude soaking into the water. There was a chief somewhere in Dayton, around Dayton. He had a DuPont chemical company that caught fire, and he allowed it to burn, and they fired him because he allowed this entire plant to burn. Well, he got himself an attorney, and he went back and he fought his firing, and here, the justification for that is this DuPont chemical plant set on top of an aquifer where they pulled their water from. If he'd allowed it to burn, or allowed to put it out, the stuff would have been soaking in and tainted his aquifer. He never got his job back, but we really don't need it right now. So, you've got to make those decisions based on that. And like she said, the DOT is a fight for another day, but the one thing you got to remember is most of these rail cars that we're carrying, well, they're about 60 years old.
So
Yeah.
are we
Okay.
seeing rail loadings here in Carroll, or is it primarily?
Yeah, down at Scio.
Okay.
Through Shursville,
Right, right,
heading north.
right. One more?
I was wondering if there's any way that we can, since this is the first time we saw the signatory for this
The House bill?
paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there any way that those who weren't able to attend the meeting would be able to see it and also get all the more signatures?
Yeah, can you put it on a website or on OC
Yeah, we
or?
can email it to you
or
guys,
email
actually.
it,
So
yeah.
if you like, put down your email, and we can just email you your
Yeah,
exact.
email that around. You can write your own letter, you can do whatever, you
Yeah.
know, it doesn't have to be this letter, that's for sure.
Well, I've already got it.
Oh, you already signed it?
I mean the people who are not here tonight.
Right.
Yeah, the best thing they would do would be to go to any of,
Yeah,
or.
they can take a copy and pass it around.
Yeah. I
Paul,
can-
maybe put it on the
Website, sure, we can do that too, put it out on the website.
Yeah, I'll email it to you.
Email final. I'll
Just
put it
print
out
the
there.
paper.
Yeah, there you go. So, it's 8:30, I wanna go ahead and wrap up. I really appreciate everybody's attendance. I know that this was a lot at you today, both on the geeky side of Rosebud and then on the geeky side of this, but it's something that is pretty important on both fronts. We will let you know, with the board here quickly and take some of Tim's passion. Maybe reach in your wallet.
Is there any way that we could get a written down part of the Rosebud?
Sure, do you have email?
I do.
Give me your email, I'll email it to you.
I get your little things already.
But you gotta write some down or I'll forget. All right, if everybody could do me a favor and put the chairs back in these racks, and then for the 3 tables, if we could just fold those up and put them over there, or 4 tables, that would really be helpful.